So without further ado, let's talk and discuss about a few things with Irina. I will speak in Spanish.
You're in English.
I'm listening to the
okay,
translation,
perfect.
just in case.
Okay, but it's not a problem. Bueno, en primer lugar,
Well, firstly, the majority of you, well, I see many known faces and some new faces. To me, this event is a very special one, thanks to Yolanda and everyone around the event, and thanks all of you. And also Juana and Zoila, the interpreters, making a great job. They know English, Spanish, and they know the language I speak. So I'm really grateful because they have been working with us for many years, and they have already grasped my accent in English and Spanish. We're going to be accompanied by Irina. I'm not going to say too many words. I think it's best for her to introduce herself. She's an expert in open data. And we're going to talk especially about decentralization. We are lucky enough to have her presence with us today. She's a bit tired because she has to some additional tasks, but we're going to try and make this discussion as interactive as possible so that we can learn a lot from her because she has a lot to show us. So we are going to start with Irina, who is the important feature in this event and this session.
Welcome to Malaga, and thank you to being here. First of all, I want to know, introduce yourself. Who is Irina, or Aira, or whatever?
Yeah. Hola, hi everyone. So I'm Irina Bolichevsky. Hopefully you
It's
can
not
hear
working,
me.
the
It's not working.
microphone. Le puedo dar este.
Now we've run out of batteries.
Yo no voy a decir nada interesante. Is it working right now? No?
I don't think
I can change it.
should we
The questions are not important.
give up?
Te importarán the answers.
You talk, please.
I'm talking. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay. Amazing. Well,
Well,
I feel like now I'm
then.
very loud. Oh my goodness. Hola. Great to be here. So my name is Irina Bolichevsky, or also known as Ira or Shevsky on the internet. So I have been working in policy and technology for over 15 years, spending a lot of time working in sort of advocacy for transparency, for open data. I was one of the sort of open data pioneers. I co-created CCAN, which is this open source, open data platform that most governments use for their data platforms. And I worked with the US government, the UK, the European Commission to launch their data portals and promote sort of open source and open data kind of worldwide. I still serve on Open Knowledge Foundation's board of directors. I co-founded Decentralized, which I think we'll talk a bit more about. And currently I actually lead standards and interoperability in the UK for NHS England. So that's really looking at how do we get systems within healthcare talking to each other effectively whilst preserving privacy. And I've always been in that kind of policy-technology intersection, translating between technologists and what's possible in terms of whether it's standards or protocols and non-technologists. And I come here with my 3.5-month-old baby, so the baby you've seen walking around is mine. So he's wonderful, so I'm currently also on maternity leave, but it's really fantastic to be here today.
Okay, perfect. The baby is adorable.
He is. He's the best baby.
I want to know, you have some projects. I want to know what is Decentralized.org. Just the project. What are you doing over there?
Yeah, so Decentralized was something that myself and a few friends started 10 years ago, really kind of before decentralization took off as a topic, and I think we were one of the sort of pioneers to help bring it about. And it was really in response to, well, things like the Snowden revelations, but also the increasingly unaccountable power of big tech monopolies. So now I think wonderfully, we're much more aware of the dangers of being trapped in these walled gardens and depending on so few companies for so much of our social existence. I mean, if you think about what you do digitally, whether it's buying things or communicating with your grandparents or finding your next hot date or where to take your hot date or what to eat, really. So much of this is all running on the backbone of 4 or 5 companies who make all of their design decisions from San Francisco and really don't necessarily understand or represent the needs of the kind of millions of different diverse communities that exist around the world, and fundamentally are profit-driven. So we kind of really thought about, well, there's, the internet was this wonderful open space where so much was possible, and so quickly it became controlled by a few players whose business models were all advertised-based, network effects, try and control and own as much data as possible in order to maintain that advertised-based business model. And we wanted to kind of create an umbrella for the various projects and people who were trying to tackle this and provide alternatives. So we interviewed founders, some of whom have become very famous. I don't know if anyone's sort of in the crypto space, but things like IPFS and Ethereum, Solid, obviously Tim's thing, and some have kind of really disappeared, and it's really interesting to see what survived and why. But also organized events. We organized the first decentralization conference back in 2015 and started really creating a community where this was being discussed and talked about. And I think one of the wonderful things that we've been able to see over the last 10 years is how much this conversation has become mainstream. It's become something that policymakers are now increasingly aware about and talking about.
Okay, you told right now that internet at the beginning was a decentralized system. We know how works internet in 2001, something like that. Do you think that we can get this kind of internet? We can build a better internet right now with the big tech, or is an utopia or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Is there hope for a better internet? I'd like to say I am hopeful. And in fact, I'm going to stick with that. I am hopeful. It's going to be great. Increasingly, I think lots of organizations around the world, in the UK, the BBC has a project that one of my friends runs around public internet, and what does it mean to have a public internet? And policymakers are starting to think, actually, we need to do something. In the EU, there's the Digital Markets Act, in the US, the US Access Act, that are starting to look at what I think are some of the most promising directions for tackling this issue around interoperability, which I think we can maybe come back to and talk about what interoperability is, which is it's a really famous favorite topic of mine. But in terms of can things be better, I think they absolutely can, because they're so bad now in some ways. It's not to say the only way is up. I think that it can also get a lot worse. And it hasn't, because of a huge amount of work of various organizations and activists, not just really decentralized, but EFF and Next Generation Internet, and many of the kind of European policy groups that we've talked to and have really championed the work, like DWeb and others. But it does need effort, because the sort of centralization of power, promotes greater centralization of power. If you don't do something to try and keep kind of powerful power structures and powerful institutions accountable, the natural tendency, the kind of snowball effect, if you sort of don't do anything, is that power gets more powerful and looks after its own powerful interests. And soon, it'll be unimaginable to use the internet not via Google, for example, or Facebook, and there won't be alternatives for buying things other than Amazon. if we don't look at actually making it possible to do something else. Once your users have nowhere else to go, you have less incentive to provide a good service. So at the moment, Amazon provides a great service, brilliant. But if it's literally impossible to get anything apart from via Amazon, you can which basically, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I tried giving up Amazon for a while, and then I was like, oh my God, I'm too tired, it's too hard, and all of this search and click is wonderful. But once you've got a captured market, you can raise your prices, you can make the service worse. Once and you can kind of continue doing the things I think I probably don't need to talk about how Facebook deteriorates people's mental health and variously sends people into more extremist views through his algorithms. And the rise of misinformation, the rise of kind of various extremist groups, because that's what drives eyeballs, clicks, and because we're not really worried about values, we're not worried about, what our future looks like. We're sort of optimizing for more ad-based revenue. All kinds of horrible things happen in the meantime.
Yeah, that is real. And you talk about policymakers too. And I saw last week in the news that policymakers are investigating breaking up the big 10 companies, Will this address the problems of digital monopolies? We can think in another world with a little bit companies working in the same products, or not?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great, important question, which is, what do we do? And I think obviously looking at some of these kind of, now Facebook is Metaverse and Google is Alphabet, and under those kind of umbrellas, you've just got, waves of industry and huge amounts of data that's being kind of collected in a central location that creates all kinds of risks, not just how you get manipulated into buying things you don't need, and rampant consumerism that's not very sustainable ecologically, but also probably not very good for how much clutter you have in your house, which is a problem when you have a baby. But you can sit there and think, well, actually, let's break these organizations up. One of the things that I've always thought is completely shocking is, if you look at Apple and Amazon and Facebook, and Twitter even, the people who own them are amongst the richest people in the entire world. Yeah. And it's shocking that there's 6 or 8 people who have the same amount of wealth than the rest of society between them, half as much, half the poorest people. And you think, how do we live in a world where that is still the case and no one has, done something to stop it? The benefits of technology, which is a tool, have not been equally distributed. We're not equally gaining from how amazing technology is. We're not effectively using technology to improve everybody's lives and empower people. And I know that various leaders, I'm sort of more aware of the kind of UK, US perspective, have looked to say we need to do something, we need to break apart these organizations, and that will do something. I think I sort of talk about it probably a lot more coherently in some blog posts somewhere when I wrote, which I wrote back in the day when I was younger and had more time. I think that's not enough, which I guess connects us back to interoperability. What we really need is for people to be able to choose the applications that they want to use.
What kind of applications?
So, for example,
what is better to install, I don't know, Signal, to throw the smartphone to the water?
Well, I think
what we can do.
What we need is for people to kind of be able to sort of Oh, man.
¿Cuánto pregunta?
No, we've got, yeah.
Okay, 10 minutes.
10
we have 10
minutes,
minutes.
okay.
And more because
We're still here.
we start. Yeah,
They'll drag us off
late.
later.
We start like 5 minutes late.
And
Yeah.
so in terms of like what kind of applications?
Yeah. What kind of application? What can I do here right now to be in the decentralized movement?
So you can choose what you use in a more intentional way. So for example, I use things like sort of Signal or encrypted email and Messenger. I use like Proton Mail, for example.
Mail.
Yeah, instead of Google. But also, it's very important that we have this kind of conversation as a society and say, actually, you know, we deserve better. You know, I don't think having 10 different apps is really serving me, for example. I don't like having to remember who's on WhatsApp, who's on only Facebook, who's on Twitter, who's on anything else. If you go back 5 years, you used to be able to just have one application and talk to a few of them. Interoperability, it's not sort of technically impossible. And in many other industries, we've legislated to make it possible. So, you know, for example, I only need one phone and I can talk to people who have numbers on different phone providers, and we take that as granted. And actually moving between phone contracts is relatively easy and straightforward, and that's because we've made companies have to do that. In the same way, in order to visit a website, I can use whatever browser I want. I don't have to like install Google in order to like visit the Google websites and then install Mozilla to visit Mozilla sites, and then, you know, like that would be insane. We think, why would you do that? Why that would be crazy. Or if I tried to send you an email from my Proton Mail account to a Gmail account, and you just didn't get it because you were just like, well, you didn't send it from Gmail, so why would you? Sorry, please sign up for Gmail before you can send an email. Would be like, why? That's obviously stupid. That's obviously not fun. That's obviously not in my interest. And yet, across pretty much every other space, we accept that. We accept that when it comes to messages. You know, you have to be on WhatsApp to send messages in WhatsApp. We accept it when it comes to social networks. You know, you have to have a Facebook account to message people on Facebook. And technically, this is not something that is actually a necessity. I should be able to choose my own privacy-preserving application where I agree to terms and conditions that, you know, I prefer, and maybe I pay a subscription, or maybe I install something that's open source and run it myself, or maybe my local church or community runs something for me, my library. And then I should still be able to like invite people who, you know, still want to use Facebook to events such as this, or invite people who are on email, or, you know, wherever else. It shouldn't have to be that we have to maintain all these passwords and accounts across all of these unaccountable sites. And just, you know, you don't choose Facebook because it's just so brilliant. You choose it because the people are there, and actually you don't want to, you know, you don't want to miss out. And I think that's the thing that interoperability tackles. So interoperability is around actually getting, you know, things like Facebook or whether it was Google to open up its APIs and make it possible for other companies and organizations to create programs that talk to Facebook and allow you to sort of an option of choice. So in terms of like, I think that's a large part of the solution, and that's what we should be pushing policymakers for to continue doing. And I think some of the work that's already happening is really important. But also we should start thinking about the choices we individually make, and, you know, kind of put our money where our mouth is a little bit, and actually use more sort of decentralized or privacy-preserving applications and software and companies that exist to show that, you know, we do care about the ethics of it, or we do care about how data is used. Okay, perfect. We will. And I almost have the homework to do, but we will to do. Any questions? Over there. Oh no.
Hi, Irina. Thanks a lot. It was very inspiring. My name is Francisco. I'm representing the Digital Constitutionalists here. So, especially Meta is now speaking of interoperability as the next big thing. On Web 3.0, it's a walled garden saying we will open the doors of the walled garden. And I was wondering if you think that first, is this really true, or is this just more of classic Facebook PR? Or and two, if that's the case, do you see a future where a sort of interoperable metaverse would exist? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I think there's a couple of things. One, which is the fact that you've got these companies like Facebook, like Twitter, being like, oh, we're going to open up our APIs, we're going to be interoperable. Making such big speeches means that to some extent all of the work that various kind of organizations and activists have been doing have won. You know, it's like they have to now at least like make some pretenses and claims to sort of increase competition and resilience and control of people's data. So to that extent, I think that it's really positive. And but at the same time, it's a very cynical move by these organizations to try and avoid being regulated. They're like, oh, don't worry, regulators, we regulate ourselves. Look, we're doing it, and they will obviously do it on their terms to absolutely maintain as much control and as much power as they can. So to that extent, we have to not let up and not accept some kind of fobbed off version of interop that is being offered, but actually push for the things that matter. And I think this is where there's actually a kind of a more complicated point, which is often, when I've been involved in lots of different movements around open data and decentralization and civic technology. Like the tool becomes the message, like the means becomes the kind of almost project in itself, and we're just like, we're doing open data because open data is good. We're doing decentralization because let's re-decentralize, woo! And I sit there and go like, but why? These are means to an end. Like we care about open data because we want greater accountability, or we want to have we want to kind of address information asymmetry and give people the tools and the data that they need to, build amazing kind of services or do research or equalize opportunity. We care about decentralization, not because decentralization in itself is a magic bullet. It's because actually, you don't want one person to make the decisions for millions of other people. You want to give people some greater control, and you want alternatives. You want sort of greater localism and federation because it provides more diversity, more sort of an ability, like more resilience in the system, where you actually have the opportunity to have services that work for people as opposed to work for corporations. And I think that's really where we need to kind of keep pushing. We need to keep pushing for that value-led outcomes, not just something that looks a bit like decentralization or something that looks a bit like open data. Because I saw this, especially maybe like 8 years ago, when governments started doing open data because they were like, oh, there's all these open data lobbyists turning up saying we've got to do open data. So we're going to publish some random open data that's not very usable, that's not machine readable, that like actually is
What about the quality of the data?
Basically like not like worthless for accountability or for growing the economy or whatever it might be. But open washing is now a term to describe that. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, well we've got here is 100,000 data sets, great. And I'm like, those could all be utter shit. Like, frankly, like it's not about just doing it for doing its sake, but it's about, are we actually, building a more resilient, inclusive, connected, meaningful, empowering web and internet that, like, ourselves and, our children, if they survive the climate apocalypse, can use to do wonderful things with.
Okay, perfect. Another question over there?
Thank you. I think you finally brought out my word, the washing, the open washing, the interoperability washing. So here is my point. I'm from the open data, open source world, so we are blood sisters. But these days, I've worked with the lobbies and all of these open washers. I lived in the world where Microsoft software held us, and we moved from there. What I have noted, and especially for everyone in this room, is that the digital economy is the attention economy. Whether it's Facebook or Twitter or whatever platform or Google, the ultimate aim is to keep you there. So Google is offering you the whole suite. Meta is offering you everything, including the metaverse. Twitter wants to offer you payment and all of that. The aim is the same: keep you there. Keep all your money, all your attention, all your time, keep you there. And there are deceptive designs to hold you into that kind of digital slavery, if I may use the word. So here's my point. My question is, when you say we, who do you mean? This time last week, I was meeting with Amazon, I was meeting with Meta, Twitter, Facebook. They are willing to meet, you know that. They are willing to have a drink. They are willing to invite you. They are willing until it comes to commitment, until it comes to following up on the commitment. And if you're a government person, when you begin to fight hard, they will bring you aside, invite you to one of these retreats, and when you come back, you're a different person. My question is, when you say we push, who are the we?
Who are we?
Yeah.
And when you say we push, who are we pushing?
Yeah.
And when we push, what do we intend for them to get? Being that the DNA of the digital economy is slavery, it's proprietary.
Yeah.
That is the word that defines capitalism.
So, I feel like we could have a several-day-long retreat on just that, frankly. And it's just such a really important, interesting thing, and we should talk more about it, and talk this evening for anyone else who wants to join on this fascinating conversation. Really quickly, I think there's an important role for institutions, civic institutions and NGOs to play. A lot of the change does need to come in the form of legislation, because, how do you need to kind of have competing sources of power to keep power accountable. And that could be power in numbers, in groups, in how we spend money, how we, what we all talk about, what we click on, like media. It could be power in terms of governments who have, a lot of governments are a lot less powerful than these companies, frankly. I think most governments, maybe all governments are less powerful than these companies, actually. So we're in a pretty dire place. But at this end, and a lot of the change needs to be a lot more fundamental, because this is driven by social economic paradigm and policy that is broken. If you actually think about what is driving neoliberal and capitalism, a lot of it is a focus on things that actually don't make people's lives better. Our metrics are bad. Our metrics around growth fundamentally don't include our metrics for sustainability or flourishing or connection, or, how do we stop being so addicted and distracted, and why haven't I read a book for, a month or whatever, some of these more fundamental issues. And so there's a much broader social conversation that needs to happen about actually governance and representation, which I think is what's needed to tackle some of the kind of more thorny issues that you raise. But to end on a very hopeful note, I think it's happening. We are on the edge of a precipice, because everyone knows that the current setup can't last. We are not addressing the things that are completely on fire in our society. So many things are going wrong in terms of rising inequality, unsustainable cost of living, climate change. We are not managing to tackle these really massive issues, and it's because actually our kind of governance structures and our politics are not working, and our socio-economic models are not working. And more people are thinking about researching and naming what a new world and a new way of making decisions and interacting, what a wiser world looks like. And I think we hopefully will see that in the next decade.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my positive spin. We need to go.
Yo, por tener, tengo muchas.
Kicking us off stage. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay,
I knew it.
Then
¿No vas a hacer una pregunta?
yes,
That's
last
it.
question
No.
is just yes or no, this is just centralized or decentralized to finish. Okay, you have a Richard, and you have an adorable baby and cute one. Do you think that in 15 years he's going to live in a centralized system or in a decentralized world system? What did you think about his future?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like.
Just in short.
I just sort of did this like positive spin. I mean, like, really, I'm concerned. I am worried. I feel like, you know, the powers that be are strong, but I think it's, you know, I think it's on a knife edge.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really fascinating to see what happens next.
I'm going to fight for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Irina. It was wonderful to be
Thank you all.
with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Oscar, for your brilliant questions. Great.
Thank you.
Well.
Qué pequeñita. Me pasa.
Irina, abres la puerta de...
Irina, you open the doors of thought. You travel through sections. You ring the bell on diverse communities, all of them forsaken by privilege. You question algorithm manipulation and you resist. Your resistance holds us and reorients us to more civical places.